Laura, as I was talking to Steven, our creative director, a couple of days ago, and he was looking at my calendar, and we are just kind of making sure, like, how does the rest of the week and the start of this week, I should say, pan out. And he saw the name Joe Foster, founder of Reebok, and the first words that came out of his mouth were, "That is so
cool. Those are the first ones out of my mouth."
Founder of Reebok on our podcast, because we all of us grew up with Reebok apparel and
definitely
and all the stuff that Reebok has come out with and is still around. Like it's really is one of those brands, in my opinion, that figured it out, like how to stick with the times and adapt. And I mean, you're all over fashion, Laura. So like, I mean,
it says a lot about a brand for sure. And my brother worked at Reebok as a young guy growing up. So I had lots of Reebok shoes because he got a bit of a discount. And so that was awesome. Yes, he did. So I'm super excited. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd be speaking with the founder of such an incredible company. So thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome to
it's a great pleasure. I had a nice distributor in Canada many years ago. He's from Winnipeg, and it was Fred Martin Agencies, and they really did a good job. But I do remember once we sent a big case of shoes over, and somebody dropped it in the water before they could. Right at the dock, they dropped it in the water, and I remember that phone call coming to me saying, "Joe, we want some more shoes." And I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, unfortunately, unloading this for us, they dropped it into the water and just ruined all the shoes." So
you're thinking, those darn Canadians, what are they doing over there?
I want to ship it was.
I want to take us right back, because this morning when I said, "You're not going to believe who we're having on this podcast today," to my husband, I said, "Joe Foster, founder of Reebok," and he said, "Isn't that guy from the UK?" So I was just actually hoping to get a little bit of your backstory. Where are you from?
I'm from the UK.
Okay, yes. He was right. He's like a Google, my husband. He knows everything.
Big shout out to John. Then. Big shout out to John. He already knew a little bit of Joe. But in terms of Joe getting this brand started, like, we really want to take this back. There's so many different ways. We want to talk about the expansion, the mindset, some habits for success, all things entrepreneurship, which is really kind of the buzzword now. Everyone and their mother and sister and brother wants to be an entrepreneur. We want to speak about that. But how did this all get started for you? Like, how did you come up with the thought of Reebok?
Well, you need to go back. I assume you haven't read my book.
I have not got back. I have not got to read
my book. It's advertised just there over my right shoulder, Shoemaker.
Okay.
That will
we'll be sure to put that in the comments or the description of the podcast.
Make sure we'll leave it into the comments, as Laura mentioned.
I notice you're left-handed. I'm left-handed too. That's a good
It is.
Kindred spirits.
Part of our brain.
That's good. Yeah.
All right, you two. Enough of that. Okay, anyway. Take us back, Joe. Take us back.
Can I take you back to 1895?
Yes, you can. That's why it's a podcast, and it's our podcast, and no one can shut us down, Joe.
Well, there you go. 1895, my grandfather, 15 years old. His name? Joe Foster. What did he do? He invented, or he certainly did something, because he made the first spike running shoes that people can recall. So he put spikes in the bottom of a shoe, a running shoe. And where did he get his idea from? He got his idea from his grandfather. So we're going back even farther still. And his grandfather was a cobbler. He used to repair street shoes, but apart from repairing street shoes, he also repaired sports footwear. And in those days, cricket boots. And cricket boots, they had studs in the bottom. And some were more like spikes. And we can only assume my grandfather said to his grandfather, "Grandad, why have they got spikes in the bottom of these cricket boots?" Gives you better grip. When they're fielding, when they're playing, when they're batting, when they're bowling, they need the grip. Must have been a light bulb moment for my grandfather, because he went back home to his family in Bolton, and he was a member of the Bolton Primrose Harriers. no idea where Primrose came from, but Bolton Primrose Harriers. And he wasn't a good runner. He was about halfway down the field normally, but he decided he wanted to be a cobbler. And so being a cobbler, which he got from his grandfather, he decided he'd make himself a pair of spike running shoes. And next time he went out with the guys, he'd see what went on. And okay, not on the first attempt, but certainly when he got it right, he came a very unlikely second in the race that he wore his shoes. And of course, everybody is looking at Joe and saying, he wasn't a big lad, you know, he was only a small lad. And looking at him, and it was almost like, you've either got to make his shoes or we're going to call you a cheat. Yeah, he had spikes in his shoes. Oh, that was the start of his business. By 1904, he had 3 world records. One man who wore his shoes in Glasgow in one event, a 1-hour event. How far can you run in 1 hour? And he broke 3 world records. That's 1904. Wow. So he knew something about how to sell his shoes. He knew something about marketing, a word nobody had heard of in those days. Entrepreneur, marketing, who'd heard of those things? Influencers. But he was a great influencer. Today, influencers are everywhere. The second decade of the 20th century, we had World War I. Nobody wanted running shoes in World War I. So he had a little factory then, and they turned over to repairing army boots. And even my father used to recall washing all the mud and the blood off the boots from Flanders. Then we get to the 1920s, and we have a replica of his letterhead. And his letterhead, on this, he said he supplied all the Olympic competitors at the Antwerp Olympics in 1920. Now, that's a pretty big statement now. And down the side of his letterhead, there's about 95, 96 teams, football teams that he was supplying. And if you know anything about English football or soccer, you will not be able to name a team he wasn't supplying. Arsenal, Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool. He was even Glasgow Rangers, Glasgow Celtic. All those teams he was supplying. I'm sure you've heard of the film Chariots of Fire.
Yes.
Chariots of Fire. That was it was Eric Liddell, Harold Abrahams, and Lord Burleigh. They all won Olympic medals in the 20s, and the film was about them. And he actually made their shoes when they won their gold medals. So that was my grandfather. So he was very impressive. However, he died in 1933, and I wasn't born until 1935. But I happened to be born on his birthday, the 18th of May. And my grandmother was quite a fiery woman, and she said he's brought his name with him. So that's why I am Joe Foster. So I may be Joe Foster the second, if you like, but I came in as Joe Foster. 4 years after I'm born, 1939, we have World War II. For 6 years, there are no lights. We see bombs dropping on Manchester. It's a different upbringing as a child. But you know, you're a child. What do you know? What's the difference? That's pretty normal when you somewhere between 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. 10 years old, the lights came on. All of a sudden, we had a different life. And we had education. Very difficult during the war. We used to have education in the front room of the teacher. The schools were all used for other purposes. So I went to college. I spent 1 year. I was 17. I went into the factory. My brother Jeff, he'd been in the factory for 4 years making shoes. 1 year, and it was national service. We had in those days 2 years of national service. So we leave the company and do national service. Yeah, my brother did it in Germany. And what did he see? He saw Adidas, he saw Puma. He saw things that the changes. We came back from national service, back to the factory, back to the J.W. Foster company. And what did we see? A failing company. They were still making the same shoes they'd been making in the 30s and 40s. And we tried. But by that time, my father and uncle were running this business. And they just didn't get on together. They were feuding. They fought more often than they would talk. So when Jeff and I are trying to tell them we've got to change this company, it's dying. And all my father could say is, look, John, when I'm gone and Uncle Bill's gone, it'll be your company. You can do what you like with it then. All I could say to that is, Dad, we don't want you to go. Number one, we don't want you to go. That's not the purpose of this conversation. But this company will be dead long before you are. It's going that way. We've got to, they wouldn't listen.
You're going to have nothing to give us, essentially, if the way it's going, right?
But they wouldn't listen. But you were talking about what makes an entrepreneur. Does this make an entrepreneur? This was the need then to leave the company and set up our own company. So we set up our own company, which in those days was Mercury Sports Footwear. It's a story that goes on, but Jeff and I left the company and set up our own company. So that's how we started Reebok.
Now, Joe, question for you. So how old were you at the time that you yourself and your brother Jeff started your own company? Like approximately, how old are you at this time?
I can give you that on. I was 23.
Okay.
My brother was 25. We were young. We were undistracted.
Wow.
Now, if you don't mind sharing, take us into the Foster household at that time. Like, you're now leaving the family business
and opening up a competitor.
Essentially opening up a competitor. Because there's a lot of listeners right now that are in family businesses, either restaurants, real estate companies. A lot of development is obviously here in Canada, specifically Toronto, and a lot of those development companies are family run. Mm-hmm. Take us into the Foster household. Like, what's everyone's thought here? How did you and your brother get over the hump of actually leaving? I remember leaving one of my jobs in car sales. It took me 4 days to tell my boss because he treated me like a son.
Yeah, let alone your actual father, right?
He was not my father. He was not even related in any sense, but he was my mentor. He taught me so well. Like, take us through that process in your mind and what kind of happened there.
Well, I was probably the most forward, the one who pushed this along a bit more than my brother did. My brother, he was really with me. He wanted to, but he didn't say as much. So it was myself who had to go into the office, which was sort of the dining room, or what used to be the dining room of family. And this is my grandfather's in the works. And I go into the office and I tell my father, look, we're leaving. And yes, he looked at me and a few questions, a few why, whatever. Said, look, you won't listen. We've invited you to come and set up a separate company because this is failing. But all he did was pick up a letter opener. And he just came towards me, but he gave me the letter opener. And he said, stab me now.
Oh.
And I'm saying, look, it's not like that. We've got to do this. Something has to be done. And okay, it settled down. And Jeff and I left the company at that point. We walked out. We've been to college though. We knew we had to do this. We've been to shoe college and we'd learned a lot in shoe college. We met a lot of people and they became our friends. And they were the people we said, look, we're leaving the company. We need help. Where do you get machinery from? And this is where we got all our contacts. So that helped us to get, all we knew was how to make a shoe on the factory floor of J.W. Foster's, which was fine for what they were doing, but they were 30 years behind the times. We had to learn more. So we had done that. And so when we left with the knowledge that we knew who to go to when we wanted help. So we left, we went down six miles down the road, nearer to the shoemaking area that was in Lancashire. And we set up in an old brewery. It was a big building with 3 floors. The top floor, well, the roof wasn't worth calling a roof. We had more tins and buckets anything that could catch all the water and rain that was coming through. So we couldn't use that floor. The ground floor was no windows. I don't know why a brewery needs no windows, where there were no windows. So we were on the middle floor, and it's an old building, not a very good building. So all our machinery is around the edge because the floor itself was just so difficult. And I was married. I'd left home, and I'd bought a new bungalow. So with my wife, in fact, we sold the bungalow because we went to live in the factory. At the front of the factory, there was some living accommodation. There was living. It wasn't exactly beautiful, but it was living accommodation. So we lived in the factory for maybe 3-4 years before we moved out. But I told you we started off as Mercury Sports Footwear.
Yeah.
And 18 months into the business, and our accountant saying, "Oh, boys, you're doing okay. You're making some money. You better register your name." And in other words, I said, "Well, what do you mean register our name?" Because, of course, when you have your own name like J.W. Foster and Sons, you don't need to register your name. That's your name. But he's saying, and I said, "Why is this?" He said, "Well, you're doing well. And if somebody comes along and thinks, these people making Mercury shoes are doing so well, I'm going to make some Mercury shoes." And if somebody does that, you're going to be in court. You're going to have to fight for your name. You don't want to do that. Register it and it's yours. No problem. Well, I said, "How do I do that?" "Okay, go and see an agent." So I went to see this agent who'd been, he knew what we were looking for. I sat down in his office and he said, "Okay, so Mercury is pre-registered. You can buy it for £1,000. Well, £1,000 seems nothing today. It's like, but in those days, it was like somebody saying $100,000. Like,
Right.
We were only 18 months in business. We didn't have that sort of money. The bank wouldn't loan us that sort of money. So he said, "You're going to have to bring me a new name." And of course, you're thinking, just a minute, we're just in here. We've got the winged messenger as our logo, Mercury. Brilliant, we were doing. He said, "But don't bring me one name. I need at least half a dozen, 10. Right. So I go back and we're sitting around the table and we come up with names like Falcon, Cougar, all animal names, bird names. But let me take you back now to 1943, during the war. Nothing's going on. People are going, "Oh, well, you can't go on holidays," whatever it is. But they had these local events, running events, and I won a running event. I won an 80-yard sprint. But I had an advantage. Foster's were making spike running shoes, so I had spike running shoes. So that's me. I win the event, and I go up to collect my prize. And what's my prize? A dictionary. I'm 8 years old. A dictionary.
You have no use for this thing.
Probably pretty disgusted at the time. But it wasn't a regular dictionary. It was a Webster's dictionary. And a Webster's dictionary is an American dictionary. So what am I, in the middle of World War II, being given an American dictionary? Well, I was probably pretty disgusted at the time. But we all know that the spellings in the American dictionary are quite a bit different than an Oxford English dictionary. So we're sitting around this table now, and this is 1960, and I pick up my Webster's dictionary. And I'm thinking, I like the letter R, strong. So I turn to R in my dictionary. It doesn't take long as I'm flipping through to get to R-E, R-E-E, B-O-K. Small South African gazelle. Gazelle. Wow, that sounds right. Reebok, gazelle. Fantastic. Now, had I been looking at an English dictionary, it would have been R-H-E-B-O-K.
Interesting.
Nothing like the same, is it?
That's not the same.
So I put this top of the list. I go back to the agent and I said, "Look, this is what we need. We've got all these names, but we need to be in love with this name. It's got to be our passion. We want that one." "See what I can do," he said. A few days later, he came back to us and said, "Look, the only one that has come clear that you can have is Reebok." He said, "But the registrar has put it in the B section." look, we're young. What do you mean B-section? What is it? It's a register, surely. Well, he said, the registrar says that if somebody comes to him and they're making shoes out of Reebok skin, we can't stop them. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, we thought that was way out of field. We thought, no, nobody will ever do that. 20 years later, the registrar comes back and said, we've moved you to A section. Oh, right. So, well, everybody now knows that Reebok is a shoe. It is not an animal.
Love that story.
You uncovered so much in that, because I feel like so many times, like there's a couple lessons there, right? For all of our viewers and our listeners, it's if you really want something and you're dreaming big, you're going to have to go through some difficult times, not to mention difficult times, maybe with your own family members, right? Like that's how big your dream has to be. And you have to say, look, I'm not going to make excuses and say that things are going to be tough. It's like, I know things are going to be tough and I'm going to overcome them anyway. So kudos to you for doing that. Cause I know a ton of people who would just say, it's not, I can't do this. There's too much friction in my life. And then what's even more ironic, we talk a lot here. I don't know if you can see it above Jazz's head. There's a sign that says ready, fire, aim. And I feel like a lot of what you had kind of mentioned is you kind of stumble into some things along the way, right? You stumble into starting your own business. You kind of stumble into the name, or you don't give that much thought at the start, and then things evolve over time. And so you kind of have to pivot and make changes on the fly. So those are all great lessons. It actually says here, your Twitter profile says retired founder of the best shoe company in the world. I want you to take us back to maybe one or two moments that you can think of where you kind of had to reshift some things. I mean, obviously, Jazz mentioned earlier that fashion brands tend to have ebbs and flows, and you've had some incredible competition in the running shoe space.
And just apparel in general.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the other names, they do very similar apparel, like in terms of clothing, but Reebok's always been able to, what I was mentioning earlier, still stick as one of the highest names. And from your profile, as Laura mentioned, I mean, the best shoe company ever. I love that you brought that up as well. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of like, what were some moments that kind of come to mind where you've had to overcome some things, or Reebok had to make some big changes that, maybe some of the people were a little uncomfortable with, but you decided to forge ahead anyway?
Well, I mean, there's another story. We'd only been in business about 4 years, maybe 5 years. And we get a letter from Adidas. Now, our shoe had a silhouette. The silhouette was, and in fact, I sold this silhouette to Canada. A lot of these shoes went to Canada. And they had 2 stripes and a T-bar. 2 stripes on the side with a T-bar. Mm-hmm. And Adidas said, this infringes our 3 stripes. You either desist or we take you to court. And this letter, I mean, we just started, we're 4 years in, we're doing nicely, but we've already had to change our name.
Yeah, you definitely don't want Adidas come knocking down your door from a legal perspective.
Well, it didn't take it took a few minutes. We said, and then we said, fantastic. This is fantastic. Adidas knows. Adidas have decided that we are infringing them. How fantastic is that? We'd arrived. We thought that was the moment we'd arrived. Wow. So what did we do? Well, we knew that going to court against Adidas was stupid. So we changed our silhouette and we came up with the, what is now the Vector, but it's a nice arrow shape on the side. And, we came up with that. So it was not a question of saying, well, this is disaster. It was a question of saying, like changing the name, we can do that. We can do this. So, it's taking that challenge and really thinking, okay, that's what we're here for.
Because what can we make from it?
Every challenge we get is a learning curve. It's something that we can learn from. So we changed. The least form of resistance, let's change and let's go forward. And we did. And that made us, it gave us that different silhouette, something that people now recognize very much. So that's a good example. We went through a lot of things trying to grow. Unfortunately, when Jeff and I did decide to separate from the Foster company, the biggest footwear on the market was football, soccer shoes. That was big. But by the time we were there, Adidas had already come into the country, and Adidas were in that market. For us to take that market would have cost incredible amounts. In fact, we could well have failed because we could have kept knocking at the door and not succeeded. We would have needed more finance. So we stuck with athletics. And fortunately in athletics, running in America started to grow, really started to grow. And in 1968, the government decided in their wisdom that it wanted us and sports companies to export. So they invited us all to go to Chicago to take a stand. They would pay for the stand. They would pay for our return airfares, and they pay for half of our hotel bill. Fantastic. I'm off to Chicago, but possibly a bit colder than Toronto in February.
Yes, yes.
only a bit, but you can imagine.
They call it the Windy City for a reason.
I think it was to do with the politicians, that. But
I know, yeah, that is. It's for both. We'll say it's for both.
It was windy, yes. However, so I turned up there with my running shoes and a friend that who was in the outdoor business. He came with me. We stopped off in New York to check over the sports stores and outdoor stores, and then on to Chicago. And I had lots of people come into the stand saying, "Oh, like your shoes, love them. Where do we get them?" England. And they said, "Is that New England?" No, we're talking about across the water. Well, that was a big put off. They couldn't understand that because America has so much on offer. It's so big, they didn't need to import shoes. Certainly not a small store. They didn't need that. 1968, that was my first trip. I managed to break into the American market in 1979. 11 years. 11 years later, we made it. But I had at least 6 different distributors. We tried and failed. At least 6 failures, backwards and forwards, trying to get this. What do we need? I learned a lot that we needed a hook. The Americans call it the hook. We needed a hook. And that was something that people wanted the shoe. For us to sell the shoe is one thing. For people to want the shoe is another. Mm-hmm. And to get for people, well, as I said earlier, the running market was really growing. We were in running and everybody was running in America. Runner's World, this was a publication. In 68, it was just an A4 sheet. By 1975, it was a big, full, glossy magazine and everybody read it. Everybody who was buying running shoes and going out running, they bought the magazine. So he was the influence and we had to get into that influence. I'd been over to see him in San Jose, I think it was, in Northern California. So I'd been there, we had a chat and we got on quite well. But it's, how do you get this? And then he started rating shoes. He was so influential. And he started telling you which is the best shoe that you can buy. And I think his first betting which shoe you could buy was the Nike. Nike had probably Nike Tailwind, something like that. Well, can you imagine when this magazine puts you as a #1 shoe and says, that's the shoe to buy? How many million people want to buy that shoe? Woo. Yeah, absolutely. And Nike got those shoes from Japan. How do you think the Japanese are going to increase their production so that they could meet the demand that all of a sudden Phil Knight with Nike wanted all these shoes? They couldn't. And before they could get the shoes to satisfy the demand, 12 months have gone by. And another #1 shoe is now being put out by Bob Anderson. Absolute disaster. Somewhere along the line, somebody said, look, you can't do this, you're killing the business. So he decided to do star ratings. So instead of being a #1 shoe, if you got 5 stars, there could be 3 or 4 5-star shoes. That was it. All I needed was a 5-star shoe. And I knew exactly what to do. We made a 5-star shoe, and that was Aztec. It was designed and made. I knew what he wanted. We knew exactly how to get a 5-star shoe. And I can say that now, having got a 5-star shoe, but in those days, yes, whilst you know you're going to do it, we did. We actually had good results in Edmonton, the Commonwealth Games in 1978. We brought with us the gold range. The gold range was Aztec, which was a trainer, Midas, which was a road racing shoe, and Inca, which was a spike track shoe. And we got a lot of gold medals. We did really well. So I'm at 1979, February in Chicago, and I'm waiting. I've got my shoes. Came out. 25,000 pairs. We'd love to buy 25,000 pairs. That was about half a year's production for our factory. But, you know, we hadn't been still. We knew if we got a 5-star shoe, we needed help. And Barter came along and said, we'll help you. I knew I had friends there. Barter, they would help. But then Kmart wanted a better price. That meant South Korea. And again, we've been talking to people in South Korea. So we got that covered. But along came Paul Fireman. Paul Fireman ran Boston Camping, just down the road from you. Boston Camping. And he was running out with his brother and his brother-in-law. And I could see from his face and his tone, look, I'd love to be a distributor. Yeah. He was doing Boston Camping, tents, fishing lines, whatever. And he'd been doing this for 10 years. And he was absolutely fed up with that idea. And I said, look, Paul, you know, this is going to be a 5-star shoe. This is great. He said, well, we absolutely need a 5-star shoe if we're going to do this. I said, it will happen. I'd shown him Aztec. However, we're in February. The new edition doesn't come out, for the shoe edition doesn't come out until August. So I'm backwards and forwards. It's surprising how those months go by. Sometimes they drag in, sometimes it's like, right, we've got to get. But I've been to America, I talked to Kmart, I talked to Paul. The third week of the last week in July, that's when the edition comes out, sort of a week before the month. And I'm on the phone to Paul. It was a bit early in the morning and he was a bit dozy. I think it was midday for me and about 7 o'clock in the morning for Paul. I said, Paul, get down to the local kiosk and see if the magazine's there. It should be there by now. Okay. An hour later, Paul comes back. Joe, got the magazine. Aztec, 5 stars. Yeah. Oh, that was it. We made it. That was Reebok in America. I said, but just a minute. I said, Midas and Inca, also 5 stars. So we had 3 5-star shoes. That was the hook. That was Reebok in America.
Wow.
What went through your head while you were when you said you knew that you were going to design a 5-star shoe? Like, how did you go about designing a 5-star? Like, what was it about those 3 shoes that you think got you that 5-star rating?
Well, let me ask you a question. What do you do when you're doing a podcast?
We prepare. We research. We start. We make sure all the lights are on, the camera's on.
In other words, you have everything in place. You know what to do. You're not just looking through a book and saying, now, what do I do before we start this podcast? You know what to do. We knew what to do. We were following this trend. It wasn't just a question of saying, there must be better shoemakers or different shoemakers. No, why were we the best shoemakers? Because we knew our business. Phil Knight was an accountant. We knew shoemaking.
I love that.
So it's that all the experience you brought, right, to bring it there, and that persistence. What I'm so interested in what you were saying is it took 11 years to kind of of persistence and nonstop. Like, Joe, in all honesty, I'm sure most people would have given up. So why didn't you give up?
Well, my wife used to say, why don't you go get a proper job? And we were still making money. We were still doing okay. The UK business was fine. We were exporting. We were doing bits and pieces around. But I knew that the one market that we had to have was USA. And we had to get in there. And it was just a matter that, you go through all the experiences. I learned a lot. of the number of times we didn't work. Why is it not working? Well, the man didn't have enough money, or he had a big rush for some orders, and we couldn't supply them in time. So, organization had to be put into place. This had to be done. The one thing about when Paul Feynman came along, not only did we have the right shoe, we had the man who had some experience of distribution. But we still had problems. We had big problems because Paul wasn't a rich man. I went over to see Boston Camping as soon as we got the 5 stars, and I arrived and Paul picked me up and we went to a different office, and I'm saying, Paul, what's happened? Boston Camping no longer existed. They just, as I say, I saw it on his face. He'd had enough of Boston Camping way back in February. And so Boston Camping had gone. His brother was making, he'd got a sewing machine company doing wallets for him. His brother-in-law had opened a second-hand car lot. And so Paul was there on his own, but he was hungry. Paul was hungry to do this. So Paul was ready. And yes, the demand was great. And you probably need to read the book to pick up on the problems that we went through. The first 20,000 pairs were wrong, and they came from barter. But because they were wrong, he never paid for them. And that kept him alive until the South Korean production came on. But South Korean production, you don't get a credit line. So you have to find money. We went up and down. I remember Fifth Avenue, going to the Empire State Building and going meeting some people to say, we need this company funding. In fact, the person we met, he said, well, look, I was approached by Nike and I turned them down because I didn't think it would work. And I'm not going to be called the guy who missed out on 2 things by funding you. I'm not going to fund you either. And the guy had missed out on both. Well, we did get our funding because a guy called Stephen Rubin, he's a Brit, he has a company called Pentland, but also has a company called ASCO, which is a sourcing company in South Korea. So he just wanted to have Paul source. Stephen wasn't interested in Reebok, but he thought that Paul with his team, they could call on all the big stores, Sears and whatever, and do some own product out of Korea. That's what he thought he was doing. Paul didn't want to know that. Paul said, no, we're going to be Reebok. And so that credit line, that's what made it. It helped because Stephen got a credit line. And by the time we're at 20 million debt, Stephen was worried, but the company was growing. However, that wasn't the growth of the company. We're doing nicely. There's a guy called Arnold Martinez. He's from LA. And he was a tech rep. So he used to go into the stores and show them, tell them a lot of good things about the shoes. So as a tech rep, he went in there. And doing a nice job down there. But his wife, Frankie, is coming home after going to aerobic classes. And Arnold, she's so full of it. And Arnold said, what's all this about? And she said to him, well, it's about exercise to music. And it's fantastic. We love it. Arnold says, I'm coming down and I'm look at this. Next time, can I come with you? Yes. Off he goes down to this aerobics class. And what does he see? The instructor is wearing running shoes. Half the class are wearing running shoes. The rest, barefoot. That was a light bulb moment for Arnold. Why don't we make just a nice white glove leather shoe with a nice cushion sole? Big idea. Off goes Arnold up to Boston, to Paul Feynman. Paul, there's this great new thing going on down in LA. These girls, they're absolutely fantastic. Okay, great. Paul said, whoa. No, Arnold, we're doing great with running. Look, the company is expanding. We're doing nicely. What do we want to do? Making a few shoes for these girls, just jumping them out down there in LA. Didn't put Arnold off. Arnold decided he'd go to the back door and have a word with the production people. And he was very persuasive, really was. Really good salesman, Arnold. He persuaded them to make them a glove leather shoe. just white with this Reebok on it and the Union Jack and this nice cushion. Make me 200 pairs. They did. They made him 200 pairs. Shipped them down. Arnold giving them to the instructors around town now, and some of the girls. That was a start. And then we have Jane Fonda. She actually bought a pair of shoes and she wore them in her videos.
In her exercise videos.
Her exercise videos.
Yeah, I can picture them. Yeah.
And she was wearing Reebok. And, that was it. All of a sudden, the women had possessed Reebok. Reebok was their company. They knew Nike, they knew Adidas. That was male and sweaty. Reebok, nice, beautiful. But, once again, a big mistake. And this was, when marketing people decide that they can make shoes, that's when you have problems, because he made them out of glove leather. And glove leather, you can tear it, it's like a sheet of paper. And also you have to take, glove leather is about 1 millimeter thick, which is incredibly thin. And you have to take the surface off to let the adhesive so you can stick the soles on. Within 2 months, these shoes were falling apart.
Oh.
But just a minute, we're in USA. We're in Los Angeles. The girls didn't care. No, we're going to get another pair. That was it. They loved them so much. They loved them so much. It took us about 2 months to get the leather right, where we could get a better leather and we could do it properly. But that was it.
Leave it to women to not be so practical with their fashion choices, right? They just want the new one. I knew the new one.
Yeah, the new one. Good for us. But then the company is a $9 million company. Year on that, it's $30 million. Year on that, $90 million. $300 million. $900 million, all in successive years. It was like chasing the business, and all to do with women.
Well, you're welcome. On behalf of all the women, you're welcome.
As you were going through this massive expansion, the growth of your team, your staff, the employees, can you talk a little bit about the growth in the numbers of that, Joe? Because I really want to also speak about how your thoughts of building culture, how you lead a team. I have a team of 55 right now, 44 real estate agents, because we're a real estate company here out of Toronto, and 11 support staff. And I asked that question selfishly because I want to learn from you. And so talk a little bit about your thoughts on leading a team and what it takes.
Well, what it took was a lot of people running at full speed, doing everything they could do to keep up with that demand. And it involved a lot of people. But the main thing was building the culture for that. We had built, all through my time, we built a culture of winning. So it was a winning culture. Whatever problem we face, that doesn't matter. We're going to win. And if you encourage that, people join the company who can do something better than you can. They can add to the company. Yeah, it's no good having people who really rely on you to give them the next move. They've got to be clever enough. They've got to be good enough, and they've got to be part of that business enough. They've got to share your passion. And some of the meetings we had, I mean, the passion was so red hot. It was incredible. The whole place was full and buzzing. But one of our big problems was, how do you get from $300 million to $900 million in a year? This is not to do with money. It's to do with product. How can you get that much product? Well, we can talk about what we want. We were lucky that this was a running craze. We were lucky to be in America. But then we were lucky also because Nike hit a wall. Nike suddenly had a big problem. The sales dropped. Whatever caused that, we don't know. I think running had plateaued and they needed to rethink. And they pulled out of at least 2 factories in South Korea, just as we needed production. So we were able to absorb those factories and grow. And that was just short of $1 billion. By the time we'd got to 4 billion, I decided it was my time to retire. The end of 1989, I retired. People, yes, but you've got to put people in compartments where they can do the best of what they've done. But I'm looking at a company with more lawyers and more accountants than I've ever seen in my life. And other people who can just do multiples of shoes. How many boxes do you sell? So it was developing that, which was developed in America, how to grow to that size. And I put on about 30 different countries. I was globally putting on the rest of the globe's distribution. And I find myself at 35,000 feet for most of every week of the year. I'm arriving in different cities and I'm being picked up by a limousine. I'm being driven down to the best hotel in town. And we go for dinner at the best restaurants. And I'm saying, well, this is not me. You know, we'd done everything. We'd been to Monte Carlo. We'd done the Princess Grace tennis tournament. And we had so many stars coming in from Hollywood. You can even Frank Sinatra came to one of our events. They were all there. It was incredible. And we were supplying the royals, Princess Diana, Harry and William. We had that, they were in our shoes as well as youngsters. So we were doing everything. But the challenge had gone. It wasn't a challenge now, it was a business. Now it was a corporate exercise. So it was time for me to retire. And at the end of 1989, I retired. The age of
You hung
55.
up your Reebok shoes.
No, I didn't hang up my Reebok shoes.
You can see the Reebok shirt on too.
That's true.
I just put the airline tickets away.
Yeah, I like that. When did the apparel start to like? When did that start? Like, okay, like we need to start doing jumpsuits and polo shirts and hoodies and tracks, all that. Like, when did you start to add that to the catalog, so to speak?
Well, that becomes part of the growth. And there are a lot of people involved in the company, and people, you have an apparel line. First of all, we had an apparel line because, running shoes are only small by comparison to apparel. And you see the name on apparel. You see your name on apparel there. You've got big name across it.
The Toronto Raptors, then
basketball team.
So we start doing apparel because we can show off our name better. In fact, I remember thinking up the Reebok Racing Club, where we designed a shirt and shorts, special colors with Reebok Racing Club across it, because it was at the time when marathons, they were coming on very strong, and every marathon in every big city was on television. And so I used to get our athletes that we had. They were not the super athletes who were going to win those events, but they could stay there for at least 15 miles. And I said, look, guys, you get to the front and stay there as long as you can, because the television's on. So we had this, Brussels, Berlin, whatever race it was, we had Reebok at the front there, Reebok Racing Club. And that's how you get into apparel. There's a need to get into apparel. We didn't need apparel, but we needed that added promotion. And that worked tremendously. In fact, I think they're bringing back Reebok Racing Club. Last I heard, Sandra was talking about, why don't we bring the racing club back? So, it's all promotion. It's all, how do you get your company up there in front? How do you lead? How do you get visibility? So that's how we got into your apparel. And then it just expands because it becomes part of your business. Because sport has influenced street for as long as I can remember. And it influenced street. Now we have just influencers now. They don't do anything, they influence. That's a business now. And a lot of these people, they're into being influencers. So this has changed, and it is, how do you influence your product? And so that's what apparel was all about in the beginning.
Now, Joe, what's your thoughts on what you're seeing in marketing in today's world, i.e., social media. I mean, we're doing podcasts right now, YouTube, the use of influencers. Like, if you were to start a business now, like, what would you do in terms of marketing? How would you do things differently? What would you maybe go all in on? What's your thoughts around what you're seeing?
Well, I think of me as okay. In 1958, we didn't have computers. We didn't have mobile phones. I was lucky if I had a calculator. That was about it. Otherwise, it was just a handful of American Express traveler's checks to jump onto a plane and travel. You don't do that now. Look, we're talking with each other now. You're up there in Toronto. I'm down in the middle of France. And it's like we're both in the same room. We're getting used to this now, aren't we? You know, it's not a big problem now to talk like this. I was traveling like 5,000 miles to get to you. You know, it was like, yeah, now it isn't. So where are we? Technology. Whatever you're going into now, just look at the technology, because the technology is where it's going. And whatever you do, you say, you know, if I was to get into business now, well, unfortunately, you need to take 70 years of my life away, and then I could start again, because I need to be young and stupid. You know, I need to be indestructible. I need to have ideas that nobody else liked. Yeah, all those sort of things. And the energy, you know, okay, you need that energy. You need that. You know, I can see through walls. You know, and if the walls are, I can break it down. It doesn't matter. You know, you need that, and that's not changed. But what has changed is how you get there. You know, technology is superb now. I mean, you watch now on television, you watch sport on television, and the technology, photographic technology now, those cameras, you know, you can get right, you're on the pitch. You can see that ball, you can see whatever it is. You're catching it or you're throwing it, whatever. You're so close to the action. So it's technology. Wherever you do it, you're in social media, and social media is the technology now, which is driving things forward. It's moving things on, it's passing information. It's getting to know people, and this is what we're. And why am I on? Because I have a book to sell.
Talk about your book. What can readers expect reading your book? Give us the title once again, and obviously our team is going to put everything in the comments below, and make sure that there's a link to where people can find it. But talk about your book. What made you write this book, and what can readers expect?
Well, about 7 years ago, I decided to write a book because I'm reading about Reebok, and Reebok is on Google. It's all over the place, and it's telling people how Reebok started, and it's not true. It's not true. I'm saying no.
So Wikipedia is lying.
Yeah. So I said, I got to tell them the truth. I got to give them the story. So I started off and gave them the story, and we got the story down. But a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, what we're finding from this is this wasn't just my story. This was a lesson. It was, wow. And a lot of people are reading, you did that? God, I could do that. In fact, I had a meeting earlier today with a young girl down in London who set up her own company. And she said, I read this part. Agents, I need agents. Yeah, I learned, and a lot of people are learning from it. The book wasn't written for people to learn. The book was written for people to understand this is how Reebok started. This is what we did. But yeah, I'm being told now that people are reading this and finding there's so much in it that, like we say, you know, we came up against an obstacle, and it wasn't a question of quitting. It was a question of which way around do we go? How do we get under, over, which left side, right side? How do we dodge this? And yeah, how do we keep true to what we're trying to do? We're trying to be the best running shoe company, the best athletic shoe company the world has ever had. And, you know, if that's your mission, then you keep on with that mission. So today, what would I do? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't probably be starting off with a running shoe brand, but I would certainly be looking at how I can get to the top of whatever tree it is that I'm ready to climb. And so it is technology.
Joe,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, so often I you know, I make a lot of decisions based on what I think my future self will feel about them, right? Like you always think, oh, when I'm a little bit older, am I going to look back favorably upon this decision? And obviously you've had much more experience than I have, and you're retired now. Do you look back on all the sacrifices that I'm sure you had to make? Like, you know, obviously what happened with your direct family, all the things you had to overcome, the amount of time you had to put in, your wife feeling that you should leave your job. Do you look back on it all very favorably, and if not, what kind of tip would you have given yourself now that you're a little more experienced?
Well, the other thing is I never looked back whilst we were growing the company. Reflection is now. I can look back now and I can quite honestly say, how did you do that? Why did you do that? I asked myself, how? And I think it's the faith that you go forward. And I have only one regret, and that nothing I can do about that. And that was my brother. He died just when we got to America. Just at that point, we just got the 5 stars and just got Paul Fireman moving. And unfortunately, he was an athlete. He pushed himself too hard and he developed stomach cancer and it killed him. But, you know, I guess that probably motivated me more. It saddened me, obviously, but probably motivated me more. You know, we're going to make this happen. It's got to work. So apart from that, yeah, you know, you make a decision. And if it's wrong, change it. Or maybe you go through. But, you know, we survived. We became #1. By the late 80s, we'd overtaken Adidas. We'd overtaken Nike. What's to regret? We were #1. Yeah. All your mistakes. Yeah. All your mistakes, all your problems. Yeah. You'd come all the way through it. We'd gone through the maze. And, you know, I could have made different decisions. Yeah, I could have. But would we have ended up as #1?
Love that. I love that.
Congratulations on all the success. Congratulations on finishing the book. I mean, I think I heard you say 7 years. So, I mean, I love the fact that it took 11 years to get.
Joe knows a thing or two about patience. Let's put it that way.
It took 11 years. It's taken 7 years to write the book. Where can readers find this book? Is it in bookstores? Is it Amazon.com? What is the easiest place? Where should we send our viewers and listeners to pick up a copy of your book? And I'll definitely be picking up, just so I know, is there an audio book version of it as well?
There is an audio version. I don't think that's available in Canada, is it, the audio? The audio is not out yet in Canada or America, but Amazon, they have the Kindle, they have the book. So you can get it from Amazon and leading bookstores.
Awesome. Well, the first 5 comments on this podcast on YouTube, the first 5 comments, let us, you know what, we'll make it very easy, Laura. The first 5 comments are going to get
a copy of the book.
We'll make sure that we get it sent out. There'll definitely be a book. There's about 75 books behind me on my shelves around here.
For big readers around here.
Definitely have one here. If and when this lockdown is all done, Joe, and you come to Toronto or we come to France, we're going to get that copy signed from you so it can sit on our back wall, if that's okay with you.
That's okay with me, but, you know, we may be in Toronto before you're in France.
Well, we love that. Please make sure to look us up. I mean, whatever your vice is, water, tea, a pint or a shot of vodka and or tequila, it's on us. And we would almost look at it as an insult if we didn't get to take you around Toronto. I mean, we're so grateful for your time and everything that you shared with us today.
It's been a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. It is indeed. And as I say, I've got one mission. We've got to get a #1 bestseller. So that's been my life. It's to get to #1. We keep pushing this. We keep pushing it.
If we've learned anything from Joe, it's he's not going to stop till he gets to #1. Well, so we'll help you out.
Going above the wall, below the wall, around the wall.
I need all the help I can get.
And we're definitely going to do our part. We're going to do our best. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Anytime. If you want to talk again, anytime. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Have a good day.
Take care.